Everybody, great to be here. Mike Green at my side. This is the Where to Put a Practice podcast webinar at Dr. Demographics, and we are thrilled to be here. Although, quite frankly, we may be the only people thrilled in the United States to be doing anything. The stock market fell. It was just a disastrous day in banking and the commodities. And I frankly blame Mike.
For sure.
He's the one we blame.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do a little pep talk today and put some things in perspective, if that's okay. I'm just gonna jump right over to my PowerPoint presentation and see if we can make this all work, which is never, of course, a guarantee of anything. Now, Mike, some days are good, some days are bad. I actually consider right now to be a buying day. I've told my investment guys, let's go buy something because the prices are low. And that even means buying tickets to Disneyland because everything is down. It's because everybody is assuming that with bad news like this, should I continue on and buy a practice or start up? Well, let's put that in perspective. The answer is heck yeah. Now, Mike, you may not know this, but I've been doing these consultations, advices, webinars, seminars for healthcare practices since the 1970s.
40s. 70s, right.
70s, okay? I started very early in doing this kind of stuff, and I frankly love it. And it's been hilarious because the number of people who are saying, yeah, this is as bad as it's ever been. It's as bad as it's going to be. I don't know if you remember the 1980s. I happen to remember the Carter years and the Reagan years and everything else in between. Guys, things have been bad and they always kind of snap back. So I want to talk about that today and how to put some things into perspective. Now, ours is a perilous time, but there is so much myth, so much crap being said right now that I felt I have to be able to talk to my friends and neighbors, people in the professions, you good doctors, to say, how bad are things really? Well, ultimately the question is, should I risk the practice right now? Should I buy? Should I start up? I've been getting that for the past 24 hours. And the answer is, yeah, absolutely you should. When everybody else is running away and panicking, that's exactly the wrong time to run away and panic. And just a couple of real reasons why, serious reasons, is the interest rates are due to fall even further than they have right now. The Fed is putting in all kinds of stimulus, and so are other countries around the world. And I won't go into the problems that Italy is having and what Germany is doing, how bad things are in Russia and the Middle East. But look, you guys, when everything else is looking bad, that's the time things are looking good. It means being wise. So I want to talk to you about why the risks are being talked about so much right now. Now, one of the reasons I know about this is I am a professor of communications and I teach at a real live university. And the thing is, the people that are in the university settings are often very young. I'm talking about young professors, young researchers, and they're the ones who are really wanting to talk about how bad things are. Well, let's talk about why everybody's talking about things. Number one reason is the 2020 census is going on right now. They're gathering information for people who are, well, American citizens. It's in the Constitution, and this is the year that we do it. There are facts, there are fears, there are risks, and everybody wants to make their bones by saying, see, I know more than everybody else. You got to trust me. And that's why all these pundits and writers and researchers are talking about things. And the worse they can make things sound, the better off they feel that they're doing. The problem is so often they're wrong. Now, the census goes on once every 10 years, but in reality, the census is an ongoing effort with the federal government, and data is being gathered by cities, states, and counties all the time. So we really know a lot. So let's not freak. The other thing I want you to understand is energy fluctuations. This, by the way, is the time of year in which projections on what's happening in the energy market is having a big say. So people are saying, are oil prices going up? Is gas price going up? Is it going down? And we are in a price war right now. This is not the United States that is really causing anything. We're just trying to kind of handle the craziness that the Russia and Saudi Arabia and other minor players are doing, and it's fluctuating. So there's a world oil and gas glut. And so people are freaking out. Well, what happens if our economy is primarily supported by petrodollars? Guys, this happens every quarter, but especially at this time of year, especially as we get into March and April. The other thing that I want you to understand is the news media doesn't know how to handle election years. When there is a presidential election every 4 years, people talk about what's happening in the future and in the economy, who's succeeded and who's failed. Well, the point is, most of the election year discussions are hyperbole. Everything is way dramatic. And unfortunately, if you look at the debates that are going on, there's lots and lots of passion. There's lots of heat, as demographers say, but not very much light. So what's happened is you're hearing lots of things about how good or bad things are going on. Look, anything that is ever said about a presidential candidate or the election, take it with a grain of salt. There's also the even year phenomenon. This is 2020, which means, oddly enough, that whenever there is a new century or a new decade, and that goes along with the even years, particularly those that end in zeros, everybody gets the idea that they have to preach something or predict something in order to have it come true. There are a lot of books in the pipeline that are going out on Amazon that talk about how we have to understand our society, our elections, and everything else. That's why people are talking about it. But the thing that publishers all know is good news doesn't sell. I remember a fellow by the last name of Ruff. I won't go into anything else, but he used to do an economic magazine, well, Howard Ruff. And I used to know him pretty well. And he was always predicting how the world was going to end, the Fed, the federal government, whatever. And as he told me, I know that everything that is good, nobody wants to read about. They want to read about bad news. There's also kind of an interesting phenomenon as far as the politics are concerned. I've got a lot of friends in Washington, D.C. One of my best friends is coming out from Alexandria. We're going to have a big briefing on what's happening. And he's a researcher as well. There is a dramatic exacerbation of all stories political. Donald Trump is largely because of it, or at least he's the target of it. Now, I'm not trying to say that Trump is good or bad. I'm just trying to say everybody seems to have an opinion of him. And I consider this to be political opportunism. Therefore, if you want people to listen to you, you say something either really good or more likely really bad about the president of the United States. So it's making everything a little bit more dramatic. There's also an interesting thing that is coming at an odd time, and that's, you can call it economic reinvention. I kind of consider it economic retooling, because the way the numbers are discussed and examined in the federal government, it just means that everybody's kind of going a little bit crazy, trying to figure out what does the GDP actually mean, because all those numbers are being redefined. I, a couple of weeks ago, talked about the population per household. Nobody seems to understand why that is such an important number right now. But you guys, it's a thing. And part of the thing is making all these stories so much worse is that there's an end of journalism. Oh, no, there are people who claim to be journalists. But the problem is there used to be the difference between editorial content and opinion content, or editorializing. Right now, almost all the commentators on most of the networks believe that their job is to give you their opinion. Well, the reality is nobody cares about their opinion, really. They just want to know what the facts are. But nobody really is understanding what the facts are. And so they get into kind of a little squirrely position in which they're forgetting that there's a difference between a correlation and a cause and effect. They don't understand statistics. They don't quite get the idea that numbers that may appear to change may not be any different than adjusted figures, like quarterly or annually adjusted figures. Now, look, when we are at Dr. Demographics trying to tell you what to do and how to think about the numbers and what to look at, guys, we're taking all of this into account. Now, if I don't sound as crazy as everybody else, it's largely because I'm a little older than everybody else, and I remember the 1970s and 80s and 90s. And knowing something about the history, where it's gone, the fluctuations, and what is likely to happen, and what those things mean, that's what you want to know. So I'm going to say there's an old song from Porgy and Bess called "It Tain't Necessarily So," in which a lot of people gave a lot of opinions that are kind of horse crap. Let me go through a couple of those. Religion is dead. I'm going to use that one as a lead off because a lot of people are saying, no one's going to church anymore. It is true that church attendance is off. However, there are just about as many people who say that they believe in God or feel that they are a religious person as ever before. So no, is religion dead? It certainly is not. In fact, during times of crisis, a lot of people say, I think I need to go back to my roots, figure out what I really believe in. So just as an example, you'll hear this, it isn't so. The nuclear family is over. I keep hearing that one too, because as a demographer, the big number of people are saying is we're having a reduction in the population because the birth rate's down. It is down. It's down historically, but that doesn't mean that it's a permanent shift. Things happen that people will kind of go, I think we maybe need to get back to the family. And nuclear families are not dead. There are people who are forming surrogate families in ways that they never had before. Uncles and aunts, cousins, people coming together to support each other. And I'm going to explain one important principle here. Human nature hasn't changed this year. People still need each other. They still want to be around each other. And therefore, no, nuclear family's not dead. People are having children. They're still getting married. And in fact, one of the interesting little statistics that they've recently tracked is people with money and higher education are the ones who are most getting married. It's the people who are the lower socioeconomic people, they're not. Now, you've also heard this, no one can afford to buy a house. And therefore they're saying, oh, everybody's renting. Renting is definitely the way to go. Nobody wants to own. Unfortunately, that's not at all true. It is true in essence that in some places, like in urban areas, the cost of housing has gone crazy high. And therefore, there is not as many people buying a home in an urban site. However, what's happening is people are leaving the urban sites. I can name every the top 10 urban areas in the United States, and they are fundamentally losing population. Does that mean people are lining up to kill themselves? Not so much. What they're doing is they're moving to places that are more affordable. And therefore, if you happen to have a practice in a site where housing is not ridiculously expensive, people are moving there. So when someone says to me, Scott, is this area going to be reasonable to put a practice in? I'll talk about what's the direction of the affordability of housing. That's what we look at. Now, I also hear this one from time to time. Solo practice is going extinct. No one can be in practice by themselves. Certainly no solo practitioner can do this. And even small privately held offices are dead. Now, I'm going to tell you a little secret. A lot of the people that I talk to about this are in the business of forming group practices and corporate offices. That's their business. So naturally, what the thing they're looking at day and night is how do we form practices? Medical, dental, veterinary, optometric, they'll pretty much all say the same thing. You got to be in with other people. Now, I will agree that in some places, the cost of an office and the cost of staff is going up. It really just means that you're going to have to make some accommodation and adjustments to find places to practice. But guys, I know so many people who are forming practices right now. Like looking right outside the window, there's a guy forming a practice. And, they're going to make a lot of money. So don't buy into this group think that everybody is avoiding uh, owning something. They're not. The people who are going to make the most money, and by a lot, are those people who are signing the big leases, forming new practices, getting partners, and building an office. Now, some people believe that socialism is inevitable, and we've heard a lot from some political candidates. I won't go on to as to who they are, but they have been saying no matter what, this is what the future of the American economy is. It's socialist. I don't know if you know this, but in about 1916 to 1918, everybody thought socialism was the wave of the future. Little secret also, guys, it isn't going to happen. Americans, citizens, non-citizens, all feel socialism is not is not a good way to go. It's not helpful to you. It is awful. Now, the other thing that you're going to hear a lot about in the near future is how different the next generation is. Gen Z, I think, is the next up in line from what demographers are saying. Gen X, millennials, Gen Y, whatever you want to call them, they always believe that somehow they are the exception to the rule. There is a communications theory, incidentally, about cohort theory. And that is people who've gone through the same experiences tend to have the same points of view. Well, that is not wrong, but the problem is the things that make up a cohort, the big news events, the things that really change our lives, are not as often occurring nor as big as you might think. Everybody remembers 9/11. New York was devastated. But the thing is, outside of New York and maybe New Jersey, parts of Connecticut, and parts of Washington, D.C., it didn't have that lasting effect on anything. And therefore, the next generation that was formed by the points of view, unfortunately, they don't have those similar points of view. They're different. So just knowing the fact that these things are the way they are, don't buy into the common belief that somehow people are fundamentally different than they once were. Now, let me give you a generational fact. You've heard of the baby boom generation, and those are the children of veterans coming home from World War II, and they're sweethearts. Now, you may think that that was a major, amazing event, and it was a big deal that lots and lots of children were born within that age cohort. But the problem is there was almost no births going on before they came home from the war. And since World War II, the decline has been pretty steep. We haven't had as many people forming families. I'm going to tell you there's a snake in the python, or a pig in the python, as somehow demographers call it, that do happen. But don't believe in the big shifts were caused because people were different or they're benefited or whatever by the circumstances that they were in. You guys, if houses are not selling as they once did, back in my parents' and grandparents' generation, a minority of people owned a home. They usually rented. Those homes were very tiny. Nobody had a television set back in the day. My parents discussed going over to their neighbor's home to watch wrestling on their television, which was about that big and only in black and white. Now, listen, we're living in pretty good times, and things are likely to get better in some ways and worse in others. The worst thing you can do is to believe the hyperbole that you hear from other people. However, there are some trends to bet the farm on. I want to go through some of these really quickly. With vision and tenacity, those people who do that will always win, eventually, maybe not immediately. So if you're smart, you're going to form a practice. You're going to own something. You're going to make a longer term investment in a good location. They're the ones who get rich. If you handle everything overly cautiously, it won't work. Every success comes with a price, every single one of them. A person doesn't get through professional school, like medical school, vet school, optometry. You know what I'm talking about. It comes with a price. One of those things is it takes effort, it takes intelligence, and it takes drive. No one is ever going to come up to you as a doctor and say, I need to make you rich. Now, there's going to be a price. If you make that price, if you pay it, you'll do well. I also want to remind you of something, that third point: failure is easy. It's not hard at all to fall apart. It's not hard to blame other people. And there are so many people in the generations today who are looking for someone else to blame. Doctors, if you're looking for someone to blame, you are not going to do well in your profession. Now, listen, your parents were ignorant and wrong until they were right. And I bring this up because there are lots of things that the older generation has told us that we ignore at our peril. And sometimes grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, even great grandparents, older siblings are actually right, but you don't recognize it because you're not seeing that their life is like a lesson to you. I also like to bring up this second to the last point: which direction do the geese fly? I bring it up because geese are not very smart. However, they do have compulsions to do things, and they're better to fly in any direction than not fly at all. It's the geese that are on the ground that get eaten by cats, dogs, and other wild beasts. You got to move. You got to do something. Have the propensity toward action. Now, I want you to ask yourself, what should you have known to do better in your life? What are the facts that you should have picked up? What direction should you have made? That's what I want you to think about. Now, I want to share with you two things that have helped me dramatically in my life, and they are hope and history. I have two relatives of mine in pictures on the screen right now. That little girl is on the left. That's Hope. That's my granddaughter. Her name is Lily. She was born about 4 months ago. And Lily can't walk, can't talk, can't do anything. She poops great. She will eat to excess, and she's about as sweet a little thing as there ever was. Lily gives me hope. Now, it happens that next month we're having another grandson, and she joins the other 5 grandchildren, Lily did, and they were having another grandson next month. I don't know him, haven't met him yet, but I have a feeling he's going to poop like a champ and eat a lot too, and cuddle right in with mommy. I love the idea of having grandchildren. I love the idea that what they give us is hope and a reason to continue living. There are plenty of them. Oh, and I didn't mention, we just found out Sunday that another daughter of mine has just announced that we're having another baby. That baby is going to be coming right around Halloween. Now, do I believe that somehow these are the people, these babies, that are really going to give me the power to win? They're not a luck charm. They're not talismans, but they are a reason to get up in the morning and work hard. Getting up in the morning and working hard is an important fact of life. The market may have fallen apart. I don't know anybody who's going to die because of that. Now, the fellow on the other side is a relative of mine, one of my ancestors. His name is B.H. Roberts. He was born in England, very poor, had to sing in a tavern to make a living. He was illiterate until he was about 14 years of age. As he used to refer to it, he says, I was one of the stupidest, most ignorant young men ever. B.H. Roberts was a self-taught historian, a brilliant man who walked across the plains as a child with his older sister. They had nothing, almost nothing at all, but they did have hope and they did have tenacity. Now, B.H. Roberts has had a picture here. He's in costume, by the way, but a brilliant and a good man, had lots of kids in himself. And all of us who are related to him look back on him with gratitude for what he put up with to try to succeed against hard odds. I don't think anybody ever said that we're going to have an easy time. That's not really what we're here in life for, is to have an easy time. But we are here to gain and to learn, to express ourselves with hope, and to live out the best history we can. I want to be like B.H. Roberts and to live the kind of worthy life that he set as an example for his children, grandchildren, and his many descendants. I want you to remember the practice site Viability Report is to give you answers. It's for what you don't know. It's to tell you something that may give you hope and vision. But it isn't going to happen unless you get off the ground like the geese, because there are a lot of things out there that are going to kill and destroy you. Mike, what do you think?
Scott, that was a very moving session. Thank you for sharing such personal and wonderful details. You know, the thing that I think about, and as I'm watching the market go through its fluctuations and whatnot, I remember back in the when we fell off the edge of the world in, what was it, 2008. I remember riding in a car and listening to the market, lose 1,000 points a day. And I was working in the real estate world at that time, which was devastated, absolutely devastated. But the thing, looking back on that, 10, 12 years later, the thing that I really am amazed is some of the most successful business people that I know today started their business during that time.
Yeah.
And that's pretty true if you look back in history, that when everybody's down and all the chicken littles are out there just, thinking that the world's coming to an end, the true superstars seem to rise to the top and rise to the challenge. So my question, I think, for doctors that are watching this or practice owners that are watching this is, where do you fall when the chips are down? Are you going to be a superstar? Are you going to be that one that starts that business and is crazy successful and just adds to the success as the recovery comes? And it's too soon to tell right now on how long this will last, or how far-reaching the damage will be. And maybe by this time next Wednesday, it'll all be over. We just don't know. But what I do know is that superstars are superstars regardless of what's going on the outside. And I think that is your point, right? B.H. Roberts is a great example. Someone who has had a massive impact on history, but would have been seen as just another small peasant of no consequence. And I think that's the key here, is that if it's your time, it's your time. And if it's time for you to open a practice this year, then do what you need to do and go forward. The universe will bless you because of it. That is why we're still in business. That is why we still provide marketing strategies, demographic research that's significant right now. Because frankly, your strategy might be different. Matter of fact, I was just on the phone with a client this morning that wanted to put out a video, and it was relevant to what's going on right now. And that's the power of being nimble, and that's the power of someone that's willing to be a superstar and is not just going to stick their head in the sand regardless of what's going on the outside of their office walls.
Right. And Mike, just a last little note on this for everybody else. You guys, our lives haven't exactly been zooming straight up in our lives, but rather it's against the opposition that we tend to say that's where we test the mettle of a person. Mike is that kind of guy too. He knows to get up and to feed the little pigs and the goats and the little horses.
Yeah, you have to wrestle them every morning.
Every morning. Then again, that's what makes life worth living, and that's why we change so many diapers. Anyway, you guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back next week, and we wish you the best of luck. Let us know how we can